All right, welcome everyone. This is Sheila Kamara Hay of Ecstatic Birth, and welcome to another conversation to transform birth. I'm really excited about this one because we're going to be talking about a topic that I feel like is so important to childbirth. I have with me today Juanita Chase. So first, let's say hello. Hi, Juanita.
Hi, thank you. Thank you for having me.
I am so happy that you're here. And we're going to talk about today Juanita's births. And actually, what's significant for you to know about her births is, she has 3 children. And when she was getting ready for her second birth, was really envisioning sort of like a natural, ecstatic, maybe orgasmic sort of birth. And she had a pretty traumatic experience. And I'll let her tell you the details. But her journey has been really understanding how her background as a trauma survivor impacted her birth experience, and then healing that and clearing that so that she could have, the birth that she had just a few months ago, which was the ecstatic and orgasmic birth of her dreams. So this topic of like how trauma plays a role, whether it's like sexual trauma or other parts of trauma that we hold in our body that we may not be conscious of, how that can play a role in really derailing our labor and delivery process. So that's where we're going today. And you're going to hear some beautiful details about birth and some amazing suggestions about how you can make sure your body is clear. So on that note, welcome once again, Juanita. I'm so happy to have you here to share your story.
Thank you. So I'll just go quickly with my background is I was a teen mom. I had a daughter at 15 in the hospital. No one asked me. I got an epidural. I got a episiotomy. And then my daughter was placed for adoption. So fast forward to 2.5 years ago when I had my son, I really wanted to reclaim my voice. I decided that I didn't want anybody in the birth space, but my husband, my midwife, and my doula. I wanted it at home because I needed to feel like I had autonomy over everything. And before I even got pregnant with my son, I did so much talk therapy. I knew that I had trauma from my past. I'm a sexual assault survivor from childhood. I did not talk about it for 25 years. No one knew. I held that secret for a very long time. So I knew if I wanted to have the life and family that I wanted, that I needed to clear out that trauma. So I did 2 years of EMDR and really intense therapy around my sexual trauma. I did not know that I could be triggered in an unmedicated birth because I was not triggered in my daughter's birth. But again, I had an epidural. So it really happened extremely during transition. I dissociated, I froze. I have video of my midwife tapping me saying, Juanita, you need to come back. You need to be present. We need you to do this. Because of all of that, she had to coach me pretty heavily to push because I just wasn't in the space mentally. And I tore a lot. I kept saying things like, it's stuck. I can't. I don't want to do this. And my son was born fine, but then my placenta didn't detach. And I do believe that that was psychosomatic. I do believe that my placenta did not detach because of the freezing, because of the language that I was using. It's stuck, it's stuck, it's stuck, it's stuck. And about an hour, my midwife had to call it, and we had to call the 911, go to the ER. I had all the pump full of all the drugs, spinal tap, everything that I had opted out of to have him, and my midwife had tried to have a placenta manually removed. It is almost more excruciating than anything I've had done to my body. And then it came out fine in the hospital. And the thing is, usually when they have to remove a placenta, it comes out in pieces. It came out whole. There was one little piece that was latched. And I really do believe that it's because of my freezing, all the cells that were still frozen. So I had no idea that our body could hold on to trauma, the somatic, until this experience. And that's when I found 2 books, When Survivors Give Birth and The Body Keeps the Score. Both of those books really opened up a new world to me about somatic. So then I started that journey of healing the body and mind connection and trying to find places within my body that still needed healing.
Ooh, wow. And, your story is so interesting because what you're saying is that you were aware that your trauma could affect your birth and that you did address it in the ways that you knew how. but there was this other piece that was about the body and really how the body holds memory, that all of that, EMDR and talk therapy didn't shift.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And it wasn't until a couple of days later, my doula sent me pictures from the birth, and I saw a picture of just intense fear and terror. And I never had pictures of myself, obviously traumatized as a child. But when I saw that picture, it immediately hit something in me. And I was like, that was me at 14. That was me at 8. And I could see the little girl inside me that was just so scared and traumatized. And when I saw that picture, I just put that entire birth and the picture, I just put it all on hold for like a year. I couldn't even process it. And then on his first birthday is when I started to first process it. And then I had a surprise pregnancy.
Well, first, before we go into next leg of your journey, I just want to say that I'm so sorry that you had that experience and held that in your body.
Me too. It was rough, and I don't know if we can go here, but it really affected my sexual life with my husband too, because I had to redefine what sex was for me. It was a very confusing time of what I thought sex was, and then this trauma brought up so many things that I thought I healed, and then just the journey of what is sex and pleasure to me now, when it looks like me not being forced to give it, or me, being coerced, or all of those things, or me having to drink to enjoy something.
Yeah. Well, I'm so grateful for your ability to be transparent and share this, because I know this is not an uncommon thing, that sometimes having these really traumatic episodes, like when your body is invested in suppressing like a memory, or is invested in maintaining like a survival instinct, right? It's really like a survival instinct. And so the way I look at it is like, we run our energy a certain way, and all of our experiences shape how we run that energy. And when you have something really traumatic like that, and you need to survive, because the body always wants to survive, sometimes, especially when you're young, as you were, the body will just suppress. Mm-hmm. And what happens in birth, with all of that increased energy flow and all of that, labor really pushes us to expand and to surrender to that energy flow. So that can really threaten the body's homeostasis, the status quo, and it can threaten all of those holding patterns, that way that it has known to survive. And it sounds like that's a lot of what happened to you. And I know you had shared with me that you're working on a documentary to talk about this and raise awareness for this. So just want to say thank you so much, because I know a lot of women will really benefit from that.
Yes, I spoke at a birth trauma conference in October 2019, and just hearing everybody's trauma stories from birth, I wonder how many women suffer trauma in birth that it's actually coming from trauma from their past. How many things we're actually holding on to. And that's aside obstetrical trauma, but just how many things that we don't even know that we're holding on to our bodies. Like, I was very aware, I was very conscious, I had done so much work, and then this still happened. So how many of us are walking around or preparing for birth and don't know all the things that we're still holding on to, and birth brings it all up.
It does. I talk about like how birth can be one of the most transformative journeys that a woman can take if approached consciously. And so let's talk about, so you had this like really contracted moment at your second birth where, this trauma came up, and, birth wisdom teaches us that every contraction exists for an expansion. So let's talk about like how that contraction really pressed you into your next expansion. Like, what did you do? How did you heal? How did you process? How did you prepare for the birth that you just had?
The first couple of months, I was just in denial, because I had actually been praying and saying, like, I want to release my fear of childbirth. I really want more kids. And after my son, I was really thinking that I was not going to give birth again. I did not want to have that experience. So when I found out I was pregnant, my heart wanted me to have a home birth again, but my head and my fear said, go to the hospital, have an epidural. You don't even have to worry about getting triggered again. So, and I didn't feel bad about that. And I want other women to know that too. If you think your trauma is so much, don't judge the tools that you need to get through birth.
Yeah.
So I was really on that fence. Like I even went to a hospital and saw the maternity ward. I'm low risk. So I talked to the midwife there. I asked them all the things. Can I move? The lighting, the sound. And it wasn't until that midwife shared that two of their midwives were out on maternity leave and both of them had had home births. And that was a big message to me of people that work with pregnant women in birth all the time are choosing to birth their babies at home too. Then I passed a sign that said, "What would you do if you weren't afraid?" And I broke down crying because I knew if I wasn't afraid, I would have my baby at home again. That's what I really wanted. And I battled this fear through the whole pregnancy. And then I just really leaned into somatic work. So I did acupuncture, Reiki. I have a morning practice I've been doing for years, but I became even more focused on the birth process itself. I do yoga, meditation, and writing every morning, like a way of channeling. Mm-hmm. And intuitively, I just started creating this flow. I didn't even know. I usually follow along online yoga. And I just created my own flow that I did every single day, the exact same flow until I had the baby. So that it's continued therapy, talk therapy. I even went to a womb healer. I've been going to her since before my son was born, but we did a lot of visualization on healing the womb. And I would visualize everybody's energy inside my vaginal canal that did not need to be there anymore. And that was really helpful. I also did steaming for labor prep at the end of my pregnancy. And through the steaming, I would visualize again all of that trauma, all of that pain being steamed out and releasing through that. I also, one of the best things I did was starting to visualize my birth. I read a really great book called Preparing for Childbirth. It's a British book. It talks about tapping. It has some tapping meditations, but they talk about how Olympian athletes prepare for their win. They visualize that gold medal. They visualize the end of the race. And so I started visualizing my ultimate childbirth, what I fantasized and dreamed about. And I also was very okay with if things went awry again. That's what I really worked on, is being open to, okay, if I have to go to the hospital, I'm going to stay in this calm mindset. I'm going to stay here. I did not pack a hospital bag for my son's birth. I did pack a hospital bag because I just wanted everything to be as calm and copacetic as possible. I wanted to bring this baby in with so much peace. So I think the visualizing, massage, Reiki, acupuncture, and it's a very privileged place because I know not everybody can do those type of things. And I'm very lucky that I am in a holistic community. So a lot of people knew my story and gifted me these services. But I would say use one of those. And also a big thing was choosing my birth team. So I loved my son's midwife, but I think that there was a lot of I didn't want the same team. Sometimes I have been told that just having the same people there could be a trigger. So at 36 weeks pregnant, I switched midwives, it took me 4 weeks to make that decision. I was so full of doubt with that. And I'm so glad I made that decision. And 3 days after I picked my new midwife, LA went into quarantine. So that was like, I really felt I was being tested with how calm can you be? How much work are you really doing to prepare for this? But this midwife was very holistic. We did a birth ceremony. Her assistant did crystal singing bowls and Reiki. So to have that whole team in the house, and my doula was all about herbs. I needed somebody to hold me up. I just wanted to be held by a group of women. And I love my husband and I did want him present for this birth. But this birth, the word that kept coming for me is I needed to be nurtured. I needed my midwife to sit down or even get into the tub with me if it called for that, that somebody was there. Because with my son's first birth, the midwife was very hands off. She wanted me to experience the birth, which was fine. But when I said things like, I can't, or I need you, from a distance, she'd say, "You're doing fine. It's okay. You got this. You're doing it." But I wanted somebody to hold my hand, rub my back. I needed that motherly nurturing, as if we were all still in a village and it was my mom and an aunt and a grandma. And I just wanted that hand holding. And I got that with this, with this birth.
Yeah. Oh, so beautiful. Juanita, what I'm hearing you say is like, and I experienced this also when I was preparing for my birth after having birth trauma, is that you left no stone unturned. Like, I'm hearing you say that you did whatever it took, like whatever inclination you had towards like clearing like whatever residue was still left in your body, like you went there. Woo woo, not woo woo, like a combination, like all of it, you did it. Like you were so committed and so fierce to clearing this trauma from your body.
Oh yeah. Even at night before I went to bed, after I put the baby to bed, I had about an hour of birth prep I would do every night, at least for the whole third trimester, which included moxa stick and hip rolling and just all the things that you could possibly think of. Date eating. I did it all for an hour, listening to my meditations every single night.
Amazing. Amazing. And so for people wondering, and we're going to get into like the birth that you did have in just a minute, but like for people wondering, oh, like, why should I go through all of that? Like, why not just get the epidural, bypass it all, know that I'm not going to be put into trauma? Could you talk a little bit about like what gifts you got from that? Like, because I think that the piece that we tend to lose sight of in our culture is like, let it be easy. Let's not do the hard things. Like, let's bypass. And there's so many gifts that come from like really doing, like committing and doing the transformative work. Yes, for childbirth, but for you personally, let's start in that place.
It really gave me a sense of control and power to birth at home and know exactly, I'm like getting goosebumps right now. I know exactly what was happening. Like my biggest goal for my birth was to catch my baby and to know when she was coming. And I didn't know it was a she at the time, but to not be coached to push, I had a list of words that were off limits. And one of them was the word push. People could say bear down, but I didn't want the word push anymore. I didn't want people to tell me what to do. I was leaving that old model behind.
Yeah.
And just to have it be my space, I feel like to have my family present, I don't know, it just felt like that's the way birth should be. And that's no judgment to the way anybody needs to have birth. Yeah. To have my family there, to have my space set up with all the smells, the sights, the colors, all the things that I needed to see during my birth, the candles, the lights down. I needed that sanctuary that I had been putting energy into for 9 months. In the same space I gave birth is the same space that I did my yoga flow. I did my healing work. I had sex with my husband in there. But I think that there's so many things I've read, and I would ask women that are watching this to do the research too, that when we do go to the hospital, because the interventions are there, we have such a higher percentage to use those interventions, even when we want to have the unmedicated birth, because they're constantly being offered to us. And we are doing a disservice to women to say that we can't trust our own bodies by having these own interventions. You've been laboring too long. You seem like you're in pain, and just, it takes away all of our sense of autonomy and control. And it puts somebody else up on a pedestal to say that they know more than me about my body and about my baby. And that was one of my mantras, was I trust my body's wisdom and my baby's wisdom, because our bodies have been doing this since the beginning of time. We would not be here if women were not birthing. And so just having that sweet sacred space we're missing when we go somewhere that's very sterile. And I don't want to talk trash about the medical field, but this is something that we can reclaim for ourselves for generations, because I really do believe this quote, peace on earth begins with birth, and that through birth, we can shift generational traumas. My mother went to that birth trauma conference with me and shared her trauma from my birth that I had never heard until just less than a year ago. I was going to be induced, and she went to labor that night in the hospital with the women were all in the room with her. She labored in the bathroom by herself silently. And I decided to shift that. I was going to be as vocal as possible during my birth. My grandmother was one of the twilight births where she woke up and she had a baby. And so I wanted to be present. I said, this birth is for my mother. This birth is for my grandmother. And I'm going to shift this, and I'm going to speak, and I'm going to make noises, and I'm going to know exactly what my body is doing and catch my baby.
What I'm really hearing with your words, but even more so with like your energy and your tone and your presence, what I'm really hearing you say is that learning to really trust your body, like taking that journey where, you know, your body had brought up some trauma from the past, healing that, like through whatever modalities you felt attracted to, and learning to trust and cultivate that trust in your body. I'm hearing you say that it's really empowering, and it's a sense of power that you hold in yourself to this day that you might not have had before. Is that true?
Yes.
Yeah.
A big word on my vision board last year was trust. And I didn't even know I was pregnant when I made that vision board. But trusting myself and trusting the people around me. And I would say, really, you have to be able to trust the people that are in your space. And that goes back to picking the birth team and being super scared and doubtful to switch care at such late stage of my pregnancy, but saying this is what I need. And the way that my birth went, that was the right team for me. I needed to trust myself and listen to that inner voice. And I feel like we've been taught for so long to squash it, squash it, squash it. It's paranoia. So many voices, but we have to listen to this.
Yeah. Oh, so okay. So now, like the moment we've all been like dying for, tell us what happened. Tell us about your birth.
I went to 41 in 1 days, and that's exactly the same day my son came too. So I wasn't worried. There was a few people that kept saying like, oh, you're getting late in there. And I was like, the baby's gonna come. It can't stay in there forever. But I woke up and I had a little like weird cramping, but I was really uncomfortable at the end of my birth. So I was like, maybe not. And then sure enough, I had some bloody discharge, and I was like, today's the day. And it was really slow. Like I had maybe a little cramping every 20 to 40 minutes. So I went about my day, did all my things. And it's funny because I knew my husband had 2 webinars that day working from home. And so I went about the day with my son. I returned emails, and it's funny because I must have been in another state because I don't remember returning those emails. I've seen them weeks later and been like, oh my God, I was like posting online and returning emails. So finally, my husband, after his last webinar, went out for a walk. And I went into our sacred space, which was the birth space, and I steamed and I meditated and I talked to the baby and I got myself ready. And sure enough, when he came back in, we all did a little meditation family thing together as a family of 3. And that's when things picked up. And my friend was our sibling support doula and our photographer. And she kept saying, I'll come over, I'll be there all day. And I just needed that alone time, and then I needed my family of 3. So she didn't come till 7:30, and I didn't call my birth team till 8:30. Everyone arrived around 9:30, and the baby was born at 11:15. So it was a really quick move. I had a TINS machine, which I had never heard of or used before. It's the same thing that they use in the chiropractic world. So I used that, and I was tracking my contractions, and that was another control thing for me, because if there's any fellow survivors watching, we need some kind of control in our environment, in our nest. We are looking for small things that we can control because we have felt so out of control. And that's one thing I will quickly share about the past birth. My midwife did say, when we're sexually assaulted, we have no control over our body. And when we give birth, we don't have control over our body. And that's really scary to somebody who has not had control and needs those little things. So these are the little tools that I had. I had the TINS machine that I could use when I was feeling a wave or a surge. And language was very, very important to me in this birth. Again, like I just said, wave and surge. I didn't want contraction. I didn't want push. I did not want to say the words I can't. I had said that so many times in my past. And so I tracked my contraction, or excuse me, I tracked my surges, and I would use the TINS machine and movement. That was another one of my big goals. I wanted to move. I wanted to dance. I wanted to move this baby out. And having found your emails at the end of my pregnancy, you send like 10 kind of intro emails. And I knew I didn't have enough time to go through your program, but I was like, I'm going to soak all of this up. And you had one on dancing. And I was like, yes, I want to move. I want to dance. I had a list of yoga poses that I wanted people to read me if I couldn't remember. You had someone on there, and I can't remember her name. I believe she's a sex expert, but she said something about not labeling the sensations as pain, that these are sensations. So don't judge them, pain or pleasure, they are sensations. And I knew I was in a good space because between surges, I would make jokes. I would say things on bouncing on my ball and say, where's my orgasm? This is supposed to be my orgasmic birth. I'm waiting for my orgasm. And there's actually pictures of me laughing and smiling that aren't post-birth. I'm actually in labor. And so finally I asked my doula, I said, what can I do now? I need to move. I want to do something different. But I said, I'm scared. She said, what are you afraid of? And I was like, it's going to be worse. And she was like, worse or just different and more intense? And I was like, that's it. That's why I picked you to be my doula, because I needed that redirection. And so then I tried to go sit on the toilet backwards. They were like, walk around, do high knees. I was doing high knees. I went and sat on the toilet, and sitting on the toilet, I was like, I felt my body involuntary push. Another goal I had, I wanted to unfold naturally. I wanted my body. I had seen videos of the fetal ejection. I knew that my body was made to do this. And so I kept saying like this, trust my body's wisdom. My body, I don't have to do anything. Just like if you've ever had a poop that's coming on its own and you try to hold it in and it's not being held in, your body's going to do the same thing with that baby. So when I sat on the toilet and I felt my body bear down on its own, I knew it was time. So I slowly walked to my tub and got in, and that felt miraculous. I did not know that warm water would be so inviting. And I just was leaning over, and such a great doula. When I would squeeze her hand, she said, send all of that energy down. Stop squeezing your hands. Don't tense up here. And she has said now post-birth, she was like, a lot of people can't take that direction. She was like, and you took it immediately. And that's because of all the work that I had been doing. And I sent it down, and I just got silent, and I could feel my baby coming down. And my doula asked if I wanted to do my own internal check. Another goal. I didn't want any cervical checks. So I didn't think I did, because somebody had asked me that with my son, and I was like, oh no. And I totally did. And I could feel the top of her head. So I knew that she was coming down. And then again, I could feel it. And I had seen a video. Again, another thing I want to tell women is visualize. I only read books, and I only read positive birth stories. I only watched videos of the type of birth that I wanted to have. I did not let anything, I made little buttons that said positive birth vibes only. I did not want any stories, anything else other than what I wanted to have. And so I saw a video on a ping pong ball in a balloon, and it shows how the baby's head goes back in, because that was really scary for me with my son. Is I would bear down and he would come out and then he'd go back in, and I was so confused. And then I understood it by watching this video with a ball and a ping pong ball, that it's a slow release. And so finally her head came out, and I hadn't said anything. I said, no can'ts, no ring of fire, no, I don't want to do this anymore, no, I'm done, I can't, nothing, none of that language. And her head was out, and I looked up and I said, the head's out. And the midwife assistant said, oh, she must mean she's crowning. And I said, no, the head is out. And they shined a light, and sure enough, her head was out. But no one knew, because I had been I was just breathing, and I was just feeling, and I had my hand in me. I knew she was coming. I had my hand around her head. I knew she was there. And then on the next one or two surges, she came out. She had her umbilical cord wrapped around twice, but I caught her, and I had a hand out, and they were like, put your hand in, your baby's coming. And so I got to catch her, and that was exactly what I wanted. Everything about this was exactly what I wanted. No intervention, no coaching, people around me to touch me. I did want hands on me. I did want back rubs. There's beautiful pictures of my midwife dancing with me and just holding me like in a bear hug and us swaying back and forth. But it was just so great to know and feel what was happening.
Wow.
And yeah.
Wow, wow, wow. That's just, you highlighted so many beautiful pieces in that story. And just to witness your glow as you tell it is everything. Um, but just to like break it down for people that are listening, like you talk about recreating your consciousness around the birth that you want, right? Like you talked about like recreating the birthing culture, surrounding yourself with support. Like these are some of the big tenets of ecstatic birth. You talk about like creating your birth space consciously, creating visuals and using all of your senses to support yourself. Like there's just like so beautiful and such an honor to witness you telling the story.
I even had birth affirmations no matter what direction I looked in my house. They were all around. And I didn't know this. My doula shared with me that there were times that I couldn't read them or see them. And I was just like, read me the one on that wall right now. Like I just need to hear it out loud. And yeah, and just to not use that, I think language was such a big part of this for me. And that's why I'm so grateful to have stumbled upon you, even though it was so late in the game, because exactly what you write, these tenants that you talk about, the people that you've interviewed, all of that was like, I knew because of the past two experiences, I was really concerned about this birth. But I knew that if there were women out there who had had an orgasmic birth, an ecstatic birth, a hypnobirth birth, because those were the three kind of models: hypnobirthing, ecstatic birth, and orgasmic birth. Those were the three things that I was really leaning into. And I said, if other women can do this, then I can too, because my body is not different than theirs.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes we think that we can't because of something that has happened to us before or something that's been told to us. And we can, we can, and we have to change that. And every time I would get fearful, Britta Bushnell has this quote I had on my wall that said, birth is not about being fearless, it's about being brave. And so every time I would get fearful, I was like, it's okay. It's okay to be afraid, but I can also be brave.
I love that
And so
quote.
that, me too.
Yeah. And like just also to highlight like your ferocity in making sure that you took care of yourself, you know, in preparing for birth and during birth. Like that's a really big piece of it. And I remember when I was preparing for my second birth, my midwife said to me, some of the best births that she's seen are the ones where the first birth was traumatic. And the reason for that is that like it inspires a certain commitment to the self and a certain ferocity. And my biggest quest, like my biggest dream is like, how do you inspire that ferocity in someone who like it's their first birth and they're, you
Right.
know, more in that place, which I knew well back in the day of like, it'll be okay. I hope I can do this, right? But like what you actually need to create a positive birth experience in a world that tells you otherwise, in a culture that doesn't support your connection to your body, is you need that ferocity. So I really witnessed that in you, and thank you for demonstrating and sharing your journey so women can really see what that looks like. And I know like we're going way over, but this is just so good. I have two things I want to ask you. The first thing is you were talking about like as a trauma survivor, the feeling of like needing to control. And that was really interesting. And I'm wondering if there's any other things that you feel like are really important for trauma survivors to know that you haven't spoken about already.
Oh, let's see. I actually made a list and I can share this with anybody who wants it. But I made a list that I put up on my wall and I pre-shared with my whole team, including my husband, on things to do if I panic or froze again. So there were certain things like if you see me panicking, tell me to look at the texture of whatever I'm wearing. Tell me to look at the room and list 5 blue things. So I had a list on freezing and panicking and all the different things to ground me. Feel, and my midwife actually used this, and she said, "Feel the soles of your feet on the floor. Feel the floor under your feet, and bear like not bear down with pushing, but bear down just your body so you can feel back into your body." So it was a lot of things of bringing me back into my body and just even sitting down and creating that list was like another piece of that control of like the environment, but also sharing actual tools. I was so afraid that I was going to have the same birth again, of that freezing and dissociating. And I really wanted to be present, which is crazy because the transition is what people talk about, leaving and going somewhere else. So I didn't even realize that the baby could come yet because I was like, I didn't dissociate. I'm still here. I'm still present. It's happening.
Yeah.
So that's a big thing, is knowing what your triggers could possibly be, and those could change during birth, but knowing them and putting things into place of what to do if those come up. I had certain smells that help ground me. So and that's why home birth was so important to me for a survivor, because I could control everything in my environment. The way it looked, the way it smelled, my basket full of my crystals and my resources and things that people could say to me.
Yeah, I would love if you're willing for you to share that list, and I'll post it alongside this video everywhere that it shows up, and let's get that information into everyone's hands so that they could really use it. Thank you. I also just wanted to say the emails that Juanita was talking about are part of a free email course that I have called the Expectant Mama's Guide to Ecstatic Birth. So yeah, I'll put the link to that as well. So anyone that's interested in taking advantage of that, you get like 10 emails a day in your inbox, and it really like lays down the major foundations of ecstatic birth, which sounds like Juanita ran with.
And I want to say that it doesn't matter how far along you are in your pregnancy, you can use these tools, because I don't think I found Sheila until I was like 2 or 3 weeks from my due date, maybe even less. And I had a daily to-do list of body work and meditations. And one of them was read Ecstatic Birth's emails. They are long and they are juicy and they are full. And I made a point to read every one of those emails because I really wanted to go through your course, and I just didn't think I had the bandwidth or the time to do it. And then I went to 41 weeks. I probably could have done it. Emails. So even if you are at 39 weeks, do yourself a favor, because it is a mindset shift. And I would like to say too, to anybody that's interested, I started a support group for mothers who are also sexual assault survivors. So if anybody needs that space, it's there. It is a private, hidden group though, so you do have to contact me to get there, because it is a very sacred space.
So is the best way to PM you?
Yes.
Through Facebook?
Facebook or Instagram.
Your handle is Snappy Hippie on both?
The Snappy Hippie, yes.
The Snappy Hippie on both. Okay, so I'll put that in as well. And the last thing I wanted to ask you is just like a minor point. I have never heard of vaginal seeming during pregnancy. I've always heard like that's actually something that's contraindicated during pregnancy. So can you just educate me and everyone about that? Like what's safe and what's not safe?
Totally. So the Steamy Chick one is like the go-to woman on steaming. So let me just shout her out. Because I went through one of her practitioners to get my whole steaming plan. So yes, don't steam in your pregnancy until about week 38. And then they have a mild steam. So I would do 2 mild steam sessions a day. And so it's 10 minutes of very, very light steam. And then as the weeks go on, 38 is these light steams, 39, it gets a little longer. 40, your due date, you can actually have full steaming sessions. And I actually steamed when I was in labor. So that was something that they said too, because steaming relaxes you. It helps with the moisture inside. And it can open up that canal. So
Awesome.
Yeah. So I would say if anybody is interested in steaming for labor prep, please contact a practitioner, because I did actually create a plan with her, and do not steam before week 38.
Yeah, and the Steamy Chick is the one.
Yes, she is. Kelly's awesome.
Following her as well. She's amazing. All right, awesome. Thank you for educating us on that. And wow, I can't believe we've been chatting for so long. And is there anything that we haven't shared, that you haven't shared already, that you really want to make sure to share before we close?
Let me say. No, I just have a plan for your dream. That's my big thing, is that work for it. Work for your birth, and your body and your mental health are worth that prep. I know sometimes it feels like we don't have enough time. Look, I have a 2-year-old, a very active 2-year-old, and we were in quarantine. So I had no help with him. And I still made it a point to work on myself and prepare for this birth. and you can have the birth that you envision. I really do believe that.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. And Juanita also has a beautiful video of her birth for anybody that's interested in flooding themselves with positive birth imagery. Can I put that link here as well, Juanita?
Yes, you
Awesome.
can. And I would say at the end of pregnancy, cut off the news, cut off social media, and just get into that birth vision tunnel.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Thank you for sharing your journey, your experiences, your wisdom. Like, there's so much here, and I know that it's going to inspire others and empower others. So I'm just really grateful to have had you here for this conversation.
Thank you for your work. You assisted me so much without us even knowing each other. So thank you so much for your work. I really appreciate you and what you're doing for women.
Such an honor. And this, like, that makes my day. I love you. All right. Thanks, everyone. Thank you for watching. Juanita, thank you again. Mwah. Lots of love, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.